All right, Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football, striking up the live stream here on a Thursday night. It's 6:45 Eastern time, and you have joined us for discussion on Urban Meyer. And assuming everybody knows exactly where we stand on the Urban Meyer situation out there, you're probably a college football fan who is on top of this situation in regards to at least the periphery deal, is that Urban Meyer has been suspended for 3 games. So that will take us through the TCU game of week 3. And athletic director Gene Smith as well suspended from without pay, both of them without pay. For Gene Smith, it's from August 31st through September 16th. Of course, like, comment, and subscribe to the channel. We've got a weekly newsletter coming out week 1 of the college football season. So leave your email address at MarkRogersTV@gmail. MarkRogersTV@gmail. Leave your email address, and you'll be on the weekly newsletter starting week 1 of the college football season. The audio you can find on Google Play, Podbean, iTunes, and Stitcher. Joined by Steve Helwagen. He's the first man that came to mind amidst this controversy for me to reach out to get the lowdown on his perspective on the situation. Of course, you can join Steve on Bucknuts. It's the 247 sports platform for Ohio State football, where he is at 247 Sports Big Ten senior writer. Steve, this being, as you mentioned to me before we started, your 9th stop along the way in talking to media and getting us all updated. I guess I wasn't the only one who thought of you first and foremost as a media contributor concerning this subject.
Yeah, it's been a long day. I think I started at 8 a.m. this morning with our own CBS Sports dash that they do, Morning Dash, and our own Bucknuts radio show. It's been just a long day altogether. Spectrum Sports, if you live in Central Ohio, you can watch Spectrum Sports tonight at 10 p.m., where myself and Dan Hope from 11 Warriors and a couple of the hosts there really bat this thing around for 3 full segments and really kind of talk about the whole Urban Meyer situation. And 105.7, I was on with Matt McCoy, the sports director there this afternoon, and I'm going to post that segment as well here shortly on Bucknuts. I think it really, I thought, gave us, and I know we're going to obviously get into it, but I think it really gave me a chance to flesh out a lot about what I thought about this. I'm working on a column right now that'll probably go up tomorrow. And Mark, one of the talking points I've discussed all day, I was at the Longaberger Alumni House at Ohio State, basically from 8:30 yesterday morning until they kicked us out at 10:30 last night, a 14-hour vigil. They kicked us out eventually, and then we went to Roosters to finish off the last little bit of work that we had to do, and did have one cold beverage as we were wrapping that up. But man, what a day, a crazy day, an exhausting day. And obviously not a great day if you're a follower of Ohio State football. It was somewhat surreal to be there at the Alumni House. And what was weird was, as the day went on, and to me, Mark, it was had to be very contentious in the meeting with the Board of Trustees about what the sanctions were going to be for Urban Meyer. People started showing up spontaneously outside the building, students and fans alike, and were out there to lend their support to Urban Meyer and the cause. So then those people all crowded into the meeting room as well. I was concerned we were going to have a stampede at one point, but it turned out to be a nice, orderly fashion. Everybody showed up to get their information on the coach. And what turned into finally the announcement that Urban Meyer was going to sit out 3 games.
So for everybody watching and listening, understand that Steve covers Ohio State on a daily basis. As we just outlined, he was on a long list of media requests to get him on to discuss the situation, because he's been through the gamut when it comes to Ohio State football going back to the mid to late 1980s. So, Steve, I want you to take this in whatever direction you think is appropriate and meaningful. But the one thing I will say is we can almost divide the commentary into 3 buckets as far as I'm concerned. We've got the facts. There were facts that were stated that we know. Then you also have this other bucket of unknown, but the committee, the Board of Trustees, had to conjecture on how much remorse there was. They had to conjecture on certain things. and they had to give their best judgment, not necessarily based on facts, but what they could kind of perceive. And then you've got number three, that whole social media, public opinion involvement that basically just just put Urban Meyer in particular on the rails following his quote unquote performance at the news conference. And I hate to be the one to look into somebody's heart and mind and deem how much they care about a situation. And that seems to have happened quite a bit following the news conference.
Yeah, you hit on a lot of good points there. It's notable that when the decision came down at 9 o'clock, they handed everybody who was at the facility a 3-page statement with kind of a summary of what they thought were the most germane facts. And at the end of that statement, it included the discipline that was laid down and kind of a convoluted solution they came up with, that Urban Meyer, who has not been with the team since it started practice, will not be with the team until after it plays its first game against Oregon State on September the 1st at Ohio Stadium. That it'll be Ryan Day as the acting head coach going into that game and handling that game. The day after that game, Meyer can return to the practice field with the team and help them prepare in earnest for the next 2 games, which are Rutgers, a Big Ten opponent, in week 2, and then at TCU, one of the top teams in the Big 12 conference, ranked number 16 in the country to start the season. And that game will be played at the Cowboys AT&T Stadium in Arlington, Texas, which is just a huge game. If Ohio State can bag that victory, it would certainly reinforce them as a top 5 team and give them a resume building win. You would think TCU's been at or near the top of the Big 12 nearly every year in recent memory. There were 1 or 2 years they fell off a little bit, but Gary Patterson typically has great teams. What will happen then is Urban Meyer will come back the following week against Tulane, and now he'll be the head coach, and he'll be on the sideline for the games after that, Tulane. And then, of course, most notably, September the 29th at Penn State, matchup of what most people think are the top 2 teams in the Big Ten Eastern Division. Not to say anything bad about Michigan State and Michigan, who are also right there, but I think a lot of people have pinpointed that it's Ohio State, Penn State are 1 and 1A, with the other ones, 1B and 1C, just kind of in a group. But I think that that gives you the parameter that he's still not going to be involved in preparing this team for at least another week or so. And they've gone the entire preseason without their Hall of Fame head coach. So that lends some dysfunction, let's just say, to this whole preseason for Ohio State. But, you think about the facts, the things that were in evidence, the things that were concluded upon, all these different things. Urban Meyer's reaction at the press conference, I think, was, and you got into reaction as well, social media. I was driving home listening to ESPN radio with Freddie Coleman and Ian Fitzsimmons, and they were just dismantling Ohio State and Urban Meyer for their, as you said, performance at the press conference. Then you wake up today and you hear David Pollack say that he thought Meyer was guilty of a fireable offense for the things that he did involving with Zach Smith and the things that happened there. Heather Dinich, another one of their top people, she said that she was dismayed that the entire idea of domestic violence had been swept away, which is really where this began, accusations against Zach Smith involving potentially an alleged domestic violence incident with his wife, Courtney, both in 2009 as well as in 2015. And it's hard to say if there were any other incidents, but those were 2 that were pretty well documented. Kind of tone deaf, I guess, on Ohio State's point for that. So a lot of opinions out there. Kirk Herbstreit thought the press conference was somewhat of an embarrassment, and he's an Ohio State grad and former starting quarterback for the Buckeyes. And I guess the only pass that I could give, which was President Drake, Gene Smith, the athletic director, Urban Meyer, the coach, is they had been an amazingly long day, 12 hours. if you take it at face value that Meyer may have been involved in some of those meetings with the trustees to either answer questions or negotiate a settlement of some sort. It was a long, drawn out process, emotional for a lot of people, and he appeared spent. He appeared wrung out emotionally, and he was also sat down there to take a public flogging and lost a lot of credibility in the course of this whole process. And again, this is something that he brought on himself. In many regards, I think Zach Smith is the ultimate culprit, but Urban Meyer's culpability in not reining him in at any point in the entire proceeding. I think there were a couple of touchstone things that came back. And you said, why are they throwing the book at Urban Meyer? Well, when he hired Zach Smith in 2012 and brought him, I think, from Temple at that time to Ohio State, he never once told Gene Smith about what had transpired in 2009 in Gainesville. And so you have a guy who you're bringing onto your campus to work with kids who has this allegation, although he was never charged, never went to trial at least, was never convicted of anything, but that was very telling that I wouldn't say they concealed it, they just failed to disclose that. And I think hindsight being 2020, that's not acceptable. I guess in 2012 maybe it was, in 2018 it's certainly not. So I think that was the first thing where you look at Meyer trying to do something to help Zach Smith, who was the grandson of his mentor, Earl Bruce. I think the other thing that really got people off guard is when, and think about the time frame of this, at 9 o'clock they had the press conference. When it was over, sometime after it was over and you're done asking questions, is when the university made available the full 23-page report by the investigating committee, the law firm that they hired. Mary Jo White, former head of the Securities and Exchange Commission, was brought in to help guide the law firm that did this forensic investigation. They looked at 60,000 pieces of electronic communication, emails, texts. They spoke to 40 different witnesses and really left no stone unturned. And she outlined that. She got up and spoke for a little bit. Mary Jo White did. But, it was just a long, drawn-out process all day long. And I guess if there's one thing that you could forgive Urban Meyer for, was that he was just extremely worn out. But getting back to that investigation, the point I wanted to make about bringing her name up was, in the course of that, they discovered there was a conversation on August the 1st when allegations came out that Shelley Smith knew about a 2015 incident involving Zach and Courtney Smith. The speculation was she certainly told Urban Meyer. He disavowed knowledge of that incident when he spoke at the Big Ten Media Days, July 24th. So that's where a lot of this investigation kind of hinged. And what they found was there was a conversation between Urban Meyer and Brian Voltolini, the operations director for the football program, with Meyer asking Voltolini, is it possible to scrub my phone of texts that are more than a year old, i.e. dating back to 2015? What was very dismaying was when the law firm did this forensic deep dive on all the devices, got into his text, there was nothing there from prior to a year ago, August the 1st. So that's kind of a missing piece in this whole thing, and kind of speaks to head coach Urban Meyer's motives, let's just say, in trying to cover his tracks or whatever that may have been. So on one hand, you have half the world saying they didn't do enough to sanction him. On the other half of the world, you have Ohio State fans predominantly who think the 3 games is a capitulation for public relations reasons, and for the president, Drake, as somebody said, now he can go to book club, look everybody in the eye and say, look, I took him down a peg. He's not going to coach 3 games. So I know I took a long way around the bend. I covered a lot of what I feel are some of the most pertinent points of what this whole episode has been about and why he was suspended for 3 games. There's a ton of evidence in there. It's regrettable that we didn't have the 23-page report to study it before the press conference, because I think it would have taken a much different attack at that point. I've made this case, Mark, and I'll after this I'll shut up for a minute and let you, if you have any questions about this, this is kind of the way I've likened this. Urban Meyer is 54 years old. He's in his 17th season as a college head coach. He coached at Notre Dame prior to that as an assistant for Lou Holtz. It has been a very, very long time since somebody in this profession that he worked for, people who worked with, players, whatever it may be, that somebody has told him, no, you can't do this. And there are very few people in our society who operate in an environment where they control everything around them. A lot of people work for other people. They work for companies, they work for firms, whatever it is. So they have, in a sense, he is the hotshot high school quarterback who has always been coddled, always been told, yes, we're going to get that for you, no problem. And in this instance, it's as if he's been caught cheating on a math test, and the principal has pulled him in and left the football coach outside the door and said, you're not going to play Friday night. And he is looking at him and saying, are you kidding me? He is almost incredulous over this chain of events. And that's how I kind of liken this, that this is the first time somebody has told Urban Meyer, no, you're going to sit this one out. And that's what Michael Drake and the trustees had to do. They had to reconcile it. Perhaps there were people in that room that wanted more. There's a lot of rumors that Michael Drake wanted much more, even up to the point of considering writing Urban a check and saying, let's go our separate ways. But at the end of the day, they got 3 games. And you just wonder, Mark, going forward, does this create a fissure between Ohio State and Urban Meyer that, yeah, they will get through 2018 and he'll gladly take his $7 million for coaching the team this year. But after this season ends, how much longer will he be the head coach at Ohio State? So those are, in a nutshell, probably a lot of the things that are rolling around in my head today after, as I said, I have covered murder trials where you have drama and suspense when a jury is out. It started like that yesterday. There was some excitement, but then hour after hour after hour went by with nothing. And finally, we got some resolution. And my fervent hope is that we are now able to turn our attention to the 2018 college football season.
Well, amen to that. Steve Helwagen joining us from 247 Sports, and Bucknuts in particular. This is his 9th media stop for the day. So, Steve, maybe
I've had a lot of practice on that rant.
Yeah, you've had a lot of practice. On one hand, maybe on the other hand, we'll put you in the same boat as Urban Meyer in regards to being through the grind for the entire day after the long day yesterday.
Nobody ever says this, but I'm ready to go watch the Cleveland Browns. So.
That hasn't been uttered for a long time, but some of us have hope for 2018 for the NFL team. The 2 things that come to mind based on what you had to say are, number one, yes, the performance of the news conference. Much was made out of that, which to me, what is more important is the decision. Is it the right decision? Is it fair to all parties involved? Is it justice? But much is made of the performance because we are a media visual based society and culture, and people weren't impressed. The media, at least, wasn't impressed with whatever remorse was supposed to be seen. And I'm not the type person that makes a judgment based on that. There are people, for example, who have, somebody failed to give them a Facebook like, and they're going to shed tears over that. And then you've got other people who are going to lose their mother, who is very precious to them. And they're just not the type of people that are going to show that kind of display of emotion. Just, we're all different. So I'm not going to make a judgment on that. But I would like to get your take on the performance at the news conference. And I also would like you to clarify what is unclear to me is that when Urban Meyer made the statement that he was defending his actions and said that he reported and went through the protocol in his statement a few weeks ago, then the judgment stated that Gene Smith and Urban Meyer failed to contact compliance. So did Urban Meyer report this to Gene Smith, who failed to take it to compliance, or they're both being tagged for failing to take it to the compliance route?
Yeah, I think that is a very good distinction. I think that if there's one thing that Gene Smith stood accused of, it was that he did not kick this up to the compliance department and get this entirely on record, the 2015 incident. As it turned out, that was one of many incidents involving Zach Smith. Some maybe a little more innocuous or innocent than others, but a DUI arrest in 2013 that he concealed. He kept private. It was a case where he was arrested late at night, had his father come and bail him out of jail in the middle of the night, and then through his attorney and the mayor's court, worked out a plea arrangement where he paid what appears to be what is normal for a DUI offense, and also underwent the 3-day intervention program. But it was reduced to another charge that was not DUI. It was called, I presume, physical control of a motor vehicle while impaired, I guess may be the proper legal term for it. But it's just one more example of a situation where he has connived and he has conspired to keep things away from Urban Meyer. Now you have Urban Meyer and Gene Smith, whose feet are being held to the fire because they didn't rein this guy in earlier. Again, 2015, no charges were filed against Zach Smith in connection with the incident. A number of incidents where the Powell, Ohio Police Department came to their residence, and he was never once charged with a crime. I think there are some people who believe there were credibility issues involving Courtney Smith. I mean, her own mother, Tina Carano, was quoted in articles by Jeff Snook and also appeared on radio in Columbus and said she in her heart did not believe that Zach Smith had ever physically abused his wife. Zach Smith said that he was always, in these instances, just defending himself and trying to ward her off of him if he ever had to get physical with her. So, the truth, again, only those two people know. Only the people who may have witnessed it. And you're asking about the performance of the press conference. I think that is an important point, that domestic violence, which was kind of the bedrock of this whole thing from the beginning, that started the situation with Zach Smith and him being in this hot water, was not really broached by Ohio State, any of the representatives in this entire proceeding yesterday. And I think they really missed an opportunity. I mean, Heather Dinich in particular was very upset about that on ESPN, as you might understand. Her being a female reporter and a mother and a wife, I think that hit a nerve with her. One of the ladies on the trustees, she is deeply involved. You have to understand, again, the university trustees, and this is true everywhere, are people who are from high society, captains of industry or prominent families, wealthy donors, etc. One of the women who is on the trustees at Ohio State, one of her pet causes is domestic violence. And I cannot understand for the life of me how they did not go into the post-game show, or whatever you want to call that press conference, and say, we are going to fine the coach this amount of money from his suspension. Ohio State is going to match this, and we are going to donate this money to domestic violence causes in Central Ohio. Whether you believe Courtney Smith or whether she has an ounce of credibility or not, that has nothing to do with the fact that domestic violence in the year 2018 is not a subject that you tread upon lightly. You treat that subject and all questions concerning it with the utmost respect. And I don't think that they did that. That was a major falling down. And they had a chance to turn something that was a tremendous negative into something that could have been a tremendous positive if they had a way to assist battered women, victims of domestic violence, with clothing and food and shelter and the things that they need to get their lives straightened out. They would have hit a home run. Instead, they went the other direction, which, again, I don't know who makes these decisions over there. And I say that, and I hate to say this, but even then people would have said, oh, it's just a token effort. What are you cannot please, in our day and age with social media and Twitter, you cannot please 100% of the people 100% of the time. So they were in a no-win situation. I think that was remarkable. And Urban Meyer's comment, do you agree with the suspension? It was obvious he wanted no games. He wanted he wanted time served I've missed 3 weeks of practice. Put me back on that field this afternoon is what he wanted. And he didn't get that. And so they asked him, do you agree with this suspension? And he said, I have the full support of our president, or I fully support our president. It was like a 5-word answer, and that was it. Very terse. His body language, as we said, he was spent. He looked detached, and I don't know. I don't know what else to say other than it was not his finest moment. Dan Walken, I think from USA Today, termed it as the lowest point of his coaching career. And, wins and losses on a field. I mean, he lost that game to Alabama in the SEC championship. I think it was a 1-2 game. The first year Alabama won the championship, the national championship under Saban. And that, I know, hit him like a megaton bomb. I think that was when he may have had some health issues after that. And certainly walked away from the sport for a year because it was unhealthy for him. They lost to Clemson here at Ohio State 2 years ago, 31-0 in a playoff game, the Fiesta Bowl. That was probably the lowest point of the Ohio State period in terms of on the field. This kind of transcends any of that, in my opinion. I think he's got a lot of fences to mend, and my guess is his way of thinking at this point is the best way he's going to do that is to go out with this team in 2018 and give this team everything he has and put this team in the position that needs to be to win the Big Ten championship and try and gain some type of redemption through his work, and then slowly try to rebuild and work on his public persona, because you think about this, he was suspended with pay by Ohio State on August the 1st. He had just come out 3 days before that as the primary pitch man, at least in the state of Ohio, for the Bob Evans restaurant chain. It's a national restaurant chain, kind of family restaurants. You see him at almost every exit across the country. And in Ohio, it's an Ohio company. So it was a natural. They named him the head breakfast coach, I guess. And now there's no chance that sponsorship's going to be coming back anytime soon, I wouldn't think. And that's an unfortunate thing because, beyond, a paid sponsorship, he and his wife are very active in raising money for Ohio State's cancer hospital, the Arthur James Cancer Hospital, one of the foremost researched institutes for cancer in the United States, is on the campus of the Ohio State University, and they've helped raise millions. They kind of picked up the ball from Chris Spielman, and his wife Stephanie Spielman had that spearheaded back to the 90s, and Urban Meyer and his wife kind of helped energize that when they got to Columbus. So, I just think that there's a very complex guy, and there are a lot of people rooting for him that follow Ohio State. I heard one of the ladies who called into the local radio station today. She said it's okay to be an Ohio State fan and not like what you're seeing right now. And I think that crystallizes what a lot of people are thinking.
That's a great distinction that you clarified of the statement that she made in regards to your football loyalties don't have to match your feeling toward the decision or the conduct of the coach or anyone else. Those can still parallel, and you can still, yes.
I'll throw in, we're 9 days from the season opener against Oregon State, and granted, it's a 1-11 team coming in, Oregon State from last year, a Pac-12 opponent in name only, I suppose. There is little to no buzz about this season, that game, or this team. And part of that has to do with the fact that the Ohio State University Communications Office put an edict out to the athletic department that the coaches and players were to be off limits. The media has gotten to go and watch the team stretch twice for 30 minutes to get, as you guys in the TV world like to call, your B-roll. Just that you can put along a story or whatever. And what I'm pointing to is on some of the stations, when you see them bring up Ryan Day's name, they will show video from one of those practices where he's gathered everybody around him and they're breaking the huddle, and he's the guy, breaking the huddle, the acting head coach. That's what that video is supposed to be for. So we haven't seen these guys, and I think that, and we still don't have an idea. I would have figured with this being resolved, maybe today we would have done some interviews. Maybe tomorrow. Tomorrow is a day at Ohio State, typically 8 days before the season opener, where they have trotted out and announced their captains. Last year they had 9 captains, believe it or not. And I just figured maybe that would be a press conference to kind of break the ice for these guys. Somebody's got to step forward and talk about this at some point. And the sooner that they nip that in the bud and get it out of there. But the point I'm coming back to is we haven't had a chance to do any interviews with Ryan Day, Greg Schiano, Kevin Wilson, who are veteran assistant coaches who could handle themselves very well. I even suggested I should be an SID. I even suggested this is what you do. You put them at the podium one at a time. You say, Coach Day, Urban Meyer is not here. This is the SID speaking. Can you talk about how the team has dealt with Urban Meyer not being there and you personally as well? And you let him answer that question from the SID. And then you turn to the media and you say, we'll take questions now strictly on the football team. And you go on with life. And you get the news that the people want to know about the team out there. And they've dropped the ball in that regard. They haven't even allowed that. I think that's a way that you handle it. Now, the media would grumble, why can't I ask him the question? Well, it's because would you like to interview our coaches and our players today? The alternative was no interviews, and that's ultimately what we came up with. We haven't had a chance. And that inability for us to put J.K. Dobbins on television or on our website or Nick Bosa or any of the other guys, Paris Campbell, there are so many great stories on this team. I mean, this is the number 3 team in the country, potentially in the race for the Big Ten and the college football playoff. And we haven't seen the gleam in anybody's eye to say, oh, I can't wait till next Saturday when we get out on that field in front of 109,000 people and we get the goosebumps and, the cheerleaders are cheering, the band is playing, and it is time for Ohio State football. Sunshine, 12 o'clock start at Ohio Stadium. There's very, very few things better than that. Script, Ohio, Carmen, Ohio after the game, all that stuff. No one's even given any of that a thought. It hasn't been a consideration. And it's unfortunate that here we sit 9 days out and no one really even has thought about the football season at all, other than just, they're going to play games eventually. We're going to get around to it. But if nothing tomorrow, perhaps something Saturday. And certainly Monday, as you know, Mark, in this business, Monday is the day when the head coach has his weekly press conference. And this next Monday, we presume it'll be Ryan Day. Typically, they would also give you an assistant coach or two and 3 or 4 players as well to kind of preview the upcoming game. So that's been the tradition covering college football since the beginning of time. Are they going to throw that one away too at this point? We don't know. So I guess we'll have to wait and see, tomorrow, Saturday, Monday. And again, people are saying, oh, Steve's just mad. It's all about him. It's not about me. It isn't about me at all. I go and I videotape those people talking to share their story with the public who, the millions of people out there who care about college football. They have a $2 billion TV contract for 6 years, the Big Ten does. And, they gain that, they have that type of viewership because people come and talk about the sport. People generate interest in the sport. And, so far there's very little interest in what's going to happen at Ohio State. But my guess is, and with each passing day, they'll amp it up a little bit. And by next Saturday, we'll probably be thinking a little bit different.
And to your point, these are all innocent student athletes that had nothing to do with
I would never. It would take a heartless person to sit one of these kids down and start probing them about what they knew or didn't know. What did you see something wrong with Zach Smith? Or that's just, I am not that type of person to ever do that. I can't speak for everybody who might show up at a given interview session to do that. But I think when you're talking about student athletes, I think it's well within the realm to say, confine your questions to football only. We're not going to discuss. If you want to ask them about their own relationship with Urban Meyer or, the receivers at the media day in Chicago, Paris Campbell was there, one of the wide receivers. He'd been with Zach Smith for 4 years, and he lost him that day before he was fired. And, of course, we didn't have all the sort of details that we have now, but he was heartbroken. He was upset, and he handled it like a man. Now, he's a fifth-year senior, so he's been around the block, and I think he's a guy that can handle it. I would never put a kid in that position typically to to speak about the controversy, or what did you see, or did you ever have any rumblings? That is so just unacceptable to me. When you're covering a college team, I think that you have to make allowances for the fact that, yeah, they're not minors, they're 18 to 22-year-old kids, but their worldly view is probably not what an NFL player's worldly view would be.
Steve Helwagen, 247 Sports, Bucknuts, the platform there, and catch him there for the best in Ohio State football coverage. A very trying day for everyone involved yesterday and into today. And this is Steve's ninth media assignment. And so we appreciate his time very much. Steve, I'll only make two more points because we could talk about this subject
all night,
hours and hours and hours and hours. One would be, to your point, I was thinking the same exact thing that you were thinking, and I sat in this chair at the same time last night before the decision was made public and stated, I fully expect for Ohio State to set up some type of foundation to deal with and combat abusive relationships, domestic violence, exactly what you just stated. I stated that I would expect them, and however that's interpreted, to be real, to be just something to mask the decision or mask Urban Meyer's failings or whatever. It would still do good and still be a response that needed to be made. And if you thought of it, I thought of it. I just can't imagine that they didn't go ahead and do that, especially when one of the board of trustees, as you mentioned, is connected.
To a cause. It is very myopic viewpoint, I think, they took with this, that let's get through the day and solve the issue at hand. And I don't think token gestures, for lack of a better term, or goodwill gestures were ever anything that crossed anybody's mind. And again, it's easy to take shots at people, and it's easy to second guess and criticize, but you hired a law firm, you paid them, they wanted to pay them $500,000. This is kind of interesting in itself. They sent that down to the state controlling board for them to pay that bill to the law firm. And for whatever reason, that request got pulled. And I just am beginning to wonder if they went well beyond the $500,000 mark in trying to get to the bottom of this. And that's why that request got pulled. I'm sure that's going to be FOIA'd at some point. The Freedom of Information Act has taken a real beating over there at the Ohio State College. They have had to fulfill so many requests. And I'm sure people are now looking for Coach Meyer's emails and texts, anything involving the name Zach Smith, probably, broad requests people are making. I made several myself. One of the ones that I made, I got several of them, like Brian Hartline, who filled in as the wide receivers coach. I was curious, what is his memorandum of understanding? Turns out he's going to work for them through the bowl game, and then they're going to reassess at that time whether he wants to be the full-time wide receivers coach, which fully understandable. Urban Meyer's contract, Ryan Day's contract, Zach Smith's contract. But what I wanted to find out on Zach Smith was, no one has ever showed me this, what are the terms of his termination? His contract runs through January 30th of 2019, basically up to signing day, or the second signing day in February. And I just wondered, was he terminated for cause, meaning no further payments for you as of this date, or are they paying him out his full salary of $340,000 all the way till the end of January, which, I wouldn't say it's an insignificant amount of money when you're talking about a $170 million budget that they have for athletics at Ohio State. But in some regards, it could have also bought his cooperation to keep him on the payroll through the end of his contract, and then they part ways, as you would think. No one has ever told me what the terms of his termination have been, whether it was for cause, WAP on that day, none other dime, or settlement or whatever. To me, I think that's a part and parcel of this whole thing. Is, again, maybe a small point, but what are his motives today? Is he adverse? Is there more out there that we don't know about? Whatever. So that was something that kind of crossed my mind. But those Freedom of Information Acts, you're going to see more and more details trickle out, I think, as some of those are fulfilled in the weeks and months ahead.
Steve Helwagen joining us from Bucknuts. And maybe, Steve, this last point that I'll make, and certainly you have the floor to say anything else that you would like to say, kind of propels us toward our next conversation, hopefully talking nothing but football and maybe the ramifications or the impact that this situation and this experience will have on the football team. So you have to think that it's going to have some impact. Does it demoralize this team? And that's a strong term, and everybody processes things differently. So I don't think it's going to be processed by every 18 to 22-year-old on that team exactly the same way, or the coaches. They're all going to process it differently. And then collectively, it's going to either impact positively or negatively. Either it's going to impact this team and they're not going to perform to the degree that we would anticipate one of the most talented teams in the country would, or do we take maybe the most talented roster in college football, and does this galvanize them? Does this give them even more reason to go out there and fight and take a us against the world attitude? And that could be the result of all this.
Yeah, I think you make a very valid point there, Mark. I think that you will see a team that is very much inspired to play for one another, to come together. Sometimes it takes a while for a team to build that camaraderie. They've been in a foxhole together now for 3.5 weeks, getting ready for that first game next Saturday, and you just wonder how it's going to manifest itself if we see them come out and they're sluggish and they don't play well and they make mental mistakes and all these other things in that game and the Rutgers game. The joke I make about Rutgers, well, two jokes. One, David Pollack on ESPN said that he felt that Urban Meyer had committed fireable offenses and should have lost his job. He's been pretty steadfast on that since day one. But the other thing is, he said they only suspended him for 3 non-conference games. And I joked on Twitter, David, it's okay. You know, the Big Ten brought Rutgers into the fold in 2014, but a lot of us have forgotten about that in the in the 4 years that have intervened. But those games early in the season, I think, we'll see if what this team has intestinal fortitude. Are they going to pull together? My other joke on Rutgers is Ohio State has beaten them by an average score of something like 60-4 the first 4 years that they've played. So Chris Ash and the boys, actually they won 3 Big Ten games last year, which is a great stepping stone for them going. If they can get the 6 wins overall and get to a bowl game, maybe play in that Pinstripe Bowl in New York City, man, that would just be the world, for them. So I think that we're going to know a lot about this team even before they get to TCU. And certainly what I worry about TCU, Mark, and I'll throw this in there. They played Iowa last year, and Iowa was a team that nobody on the roster had ever they may have played them once at home a few years ago. My recollection's all fuzzy, but nobody on the roster had ever been to Iowa City. I mean, to play a game, nobody. So here's Iowa, 500 team, kind of up and down, win one, lose one. And they didn't. It was the week after they played Penn State, so there was a natural letdown, and they went out there and laid a complete egg. And as I have joked, their team of 4- and 5-star guys got absolutely demolished by a team of 2- and 3-star guys at Iowa. And you just wonder if the same thing could happen with TCU. TCU doesn't have the high profile. They may have a few 4-star guys here or there, whatever. But Gary Patterson puts teams on the field that compete. They play hard. They play great defense. And they beat Stanford in the bowl game last year. It was a big comeback for them. So if Ohio State's not on top of their game, they are ripe for an upset when they go down to TCU. I don't think there's any doubt about that.
I would agree with that. Yes, Stanford broke out to a big lead, and then you could see that TCU speed and quickness and space really take over the game and come back in a narrow win against Stanford. And Gary Patterson, one of the guys in the country, along with Chris Peterson, I would say, that on that next tier of elite coaches after the obvious choices have prepared football teams better than anyone in the underdog role against some really good programs and pulled off a lot of upset wins down through the years. All right, Steve Helwagen from Bucknuts, 247 Sports, with a long day, a long 2 days, and probably much before that. So, Steve, we appreciate you taking time at the end of your day. Hopefully it's what the end of your day that you'll be able to kick back and watch some NFL preseason tonight and get your mind off of this and enjoy actual football on the field.
Yeah, we joked about this before we went on. This third exhibition, you hear the ESPN talking. This is the one. This is the dress rehearsal. This is the one that gets them ready for the regular. This is the one. This is what you're going to see in the regular season. I better see something good out of the worst team in football, the Browns, going against the best team in football, the Philadelphia Eagles. Oh, dear.
That's it.
Oh, dear. Maybe they'll take mercy on our soul. I don't know.
All right, Steve. You enjoy the football tonight. And we'll enjoy some college football here in just about a week and a few days.
Yep. Take care.
All right, Steve. Thank you so much. That's Steve Helwagen from Bucknuts. Steve, you can just exit. I'm probably going to stay on for just a few more minutes to address a few things here on the live stream as we prepare for our 8 o'clock guest, which is Cam Underwood from State of the U. So Miami fans, college football fans, looking forward to the LSU-Miami matchup in week 1. We're going to have Cam Underwood on to talk Canes. That's at 8 o'clock Eastern time. That's a separate live stream. For anybody who joined us late in the conversation with Steve Helwagen from Bucknuts, keep in mind that, of course, once we're done with this live stream, that it will process and post to my YouTube channel very quickly in just a few minutes right after the conclusion here. So you can go back and catch everything that Steve had to say concerning the Urban Meyer suspension and the Ohio State situation, because he covered it through and through, as he has Ohio State football for many, many years. And it's one of the best sources to go to concerning Ohio State football and the Buckeye situation, and Urban Meyer in particular, with a 3-game suspension. So I believe we've been on for so long that you guys have digressed to all sorts of topics here. So I will go to the top of the chat, see if there's anything relevant, anything that you guys have asked me that may play into the live stream here about Urban Meyer and Ohio State. George wanted a call at the beginning of the show. Unfortunately, George, we're not going to have any calls tonight. I will be looking into our phone application to see what we need to do to get our number reinstated, and we will get that out and have some calls in the next week or so. All right. George, just trying to help me cover some point spreads. Interesting. We must all be rich people with nothing better to do but wait for Pete or Lou or Bobby or Alonzo or Mark or the other guy or that other guy or maybe the other guy or the other guy to start his live feed. So I hope you enjoyed the coverage of Ohio State and the Urban Meyer suspension with Steve Helwagen from Bucknuts. And if you really listen to the conversation and listen to Steve's insight, he, of course, covers it and knows Ohio State football, and covering this situation has some insight that you're really not going to find almost anywhere else. All right, guys, I am looking through the live chat. Don't see anything in particular to address other than why is Urban suspended? It was Gene Smith's responsibility to notify compliance, not Urban's. NCIS Fanatic 21, I believe you heard me ask that question of Steve. That was something that I was confused about concerning what Urban Meyer stated in his opening statement after he was dismissed or put on paid leave. What his defense was didn't line up with the facts that came out in last night's news conference concerning the decision, because I did believe that the defense that Urban Meyer stated was that he did report the issue to Gene Smith, who then we didn't know at the time if he reported that to the police, but then we found out last night that this was something that Gene Smith and Urban Meyer found out about, and the police were already involved, and the statement made by the Board of Trustees and the committee, the investigative committee, was that Urban Meyer and Gene Smith both failed to report this to the compliance department. All right, we're going to talk Miami football at the top of the hour. We have covered Urban Meyer and Ohio State from the outset of this situation at Big Ten Media Days all the way through. And of course, unless there's new information that comes out, I think our focus will be on football and certainly the possible ramifications of this situation affecting the football team that is one of the best in the country we would expect for 2018, starting with the game against Oregon State at the Shoe on September 1st. All right, everyone. Cam Underwood, State of the U, talking Miami football. We'll be back at 8 o'clock Eastern time. In the meantime, send me an email with your email address to MarkRogersTV@gmail.com. We'll get you on the weekly newsletter that comes out Monday, September 3rd. That is after the opening weekend of college football. Weekly newsletter with a channel update, facts, stats, and trends that you won't find anywhere else, and my take on the college football weekend. The audio you can find at Podbean, iTunes, Stitcher, and Google Play as well. Of course, don't forget to help out the channel by hitting the like, making a comment, especially for these preview and prediction videos. So I am making my way through the ACC. The Big 12 is done. The Pac-12 is completed as well. When you watch these videos, please leave us a comment, at least a comment with your prediction on each team for 2018. As we continue, I'm going to make my way through the rest of the ACC tonight. You will see those videos posted very soon. The Big Ten and the SEC are coming up right here at Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. We will see you at 8 o'clock Eastern time with Cam Underwood from State of the U, talking Canes with a big matchup versus LSU coming up in week 1. We'll see you soon.